Welcome, everyone, to our virtual open house this evening. My name is Michelle Barchuk. I'm the Director of Admissions and Communications at the Mabin School. We are joined tonight by I'm going to try that again. We are joined tonight by some special guests. We have Nancy Steinhauer, the principal of the Mabin School, with us this evening. We have Graham Casson, our tech wizard behind the scenes, making everything happen on your screens. And we have two of our current Mabin families with us, who I will be introducing you to a little bit later on. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our participants for taking the time to join us to learn a little bit about our school. Next slide, please, Graham. You will be meeting the poster child on our opening slide, by the way. That's a special extra treat this evening. In a moment, I will introduce you to our principal, Nancy Steinhauer, and she will take us through a brief presentation talking about our mission and what is the Mabin magic. You'll have a chance to meet some of our current families, and we will take some questions towards the end of the presentation. During the presentation, hopefully, we'll be able to answer lots of your questions, but if something comes up, please do put it in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll have a look at those towards the end of the session. And then at the end of the presentation, I will talk about next steps in the admissions process. Next slide, please, Graham. Who is Nancy Steinhauer? I think I could do a whole session just on that, but we'll keep it brief. And Nancy's very humble, so she gets a little bit embarrassed if you see her blushing on the other screen. Nancy is a passionate educator and advocate for kids. She has over 25 years, closing on 30 years of experience in education as a teacher, as a vice principal, as a principal in diverse inner city schools, in independent schools, both single gender and co-ed. She has worked at the Ministry of Education as a student achievement officer. Nancy was awarded the Canada's Outstanding Principals Award and the Stand Up for Kids Award. She also found time to co-author a book on education that some of you may have read or are familiar with, called Pushing the Limits: How Schools Can Prepare Our Children Today for the Challenges of Tomorrow. And that book was shortlisted for the Donner Prize in 2018. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the principal of the Mabin School. We are thrilled to have her at the helm of our magical school. Nancy, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. We should do a slide where I introduce you, Michelle, and tell all the wonderful things about you. That'll be in our next open house. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Michelle is absolutely wonderful. She's our Director of Admissions and Communications. And if you're thinking about coming to the Mabin School, you're going to be talking to her a lot, and she'll give you a wonderful picture of our school. But let me give you an overview, and then we'll get into some details with some of our guests tonight, with our parents and even some of our students, if Evan feels like talking later. So Graham, can you go to the next slide, please? Our mission. So the Mabin School has been around since 1980. We're 42 years old, and we've always been at the forefront of progressive education. Our mission is to create the next generation of original thinkers, adaptive leaders, and caring citizens. And in this picture here, you see one of our staff members, Andy and Rachel, who's one of our grade 6 students. And they are carrying along a whole bunch of food items that were collected at our new tradition. We had a winter solstice festival this year. Usually we have a winter concert, but we knew we couldn't go inside anywhere because of COVID. So we reimagined our winter celebration, and we had a winter solstice festival where every child had created their own beautiful lantern with their art teacher, and with the science teacher in grade 5 and 6, they created circuits so that their lanterns would light up with their own homemade circuits. The other kids had LED lights. and we sang, we went to our local park, we sang songs. Our grade 5s and 6s created a food drive and some, they made a little market, and all the proceeds went to the Red Door shelter, and the food went to the Avenue Road Food Bank. And that's just kind of a sample of how our grade 5s and 6s take the lead and organize things for the rest of the school that benefit the community as well. Next slide. So people talk about the Mabin magic. There's something slightly elusive about what makes Mabin Mabin, but in our last strategic planning session, we talked to our staff and our students and our parents and our alumni and our board members, and we talked about what is that Mabin magic. We tried to pin it down a little bit more. It is magic, so we'll never totally pin it down. But one of the things that makes Mabin Mabin is we do student-led inquiry. Now, a lot of schools talk about inquiry, and inquiry really just means learning that comes from asking questions. That's what inquiry is. And there's a whole range of kinds of inquiry. There's teacher-led inquiry, and there's student-led inquiry, and there's something in between. And what happens at our school is the teachers are researchers really of their students, and they observe and they listen and they see where there's energy and where there's interest. And then together with the students, they come up with usually one deep inquiry a year that it's a collaborative inquiry that the students lead. And here you can see we're in a different building this year. We're offsite because we're doing a build, and we'll talk more about that. But since we're close to the ROM, our kindergarten students have been going to the ROM fairly regularly, and the teachers are using the exhibits at the ROM as a provocation for questions. And at some point, something will spark enough interest that the teachers will start to develop that with the students into an inquiry unit. Next slide, please. Graham. So another thing that makes Mabin Mabin are these three things. We're very committed to play. Our kids play from JK to 6. We try to be playful in the learning. Oftentimes the kids don't really realize what they're learning because they're busy playing. And although we do a lot of reflection, so hopefully they do start to understand what the benefits of the play are. But there's a lot of play all the way up to grade 6. We are absolutely relationship based. Our founder, Jerry Mabin, talked about the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and relationship. And relationships, or those social emotional skills, are as much a part of our curriculum as the fundamental academic skills. We don't see them as being separate, they're intertwined. And we spend a lot of time teaching the kids very explicitly about how to be in community, how to be friends with each other, how to manage their own emotions and to express them and to listen to others and have empathy, and all those important skills that will serve them well in life. And that focus on empathy is one of the reasons why we were named Canada's first independent Ashoka Changemaker School a few years ago. There are about 300 Changemaker schools around the world, and Changemaker skills are recognized for nurturing empathy, teamwork, leadership, and what am I missing? Leadership, empathy, teamwork, and
Problem solving,
which is something we do all the time. That's why I can't remember. It's so a part of what we do. The other thing I wanted to point out in this slide is these are actually grade 5s playing in a house. During COVID, we haven't been able to integrate older students and younger students together as much as we usually would. But at our school, really everybody knows everybody because we're small, and everybody plays with everybody. And in fact, we have a kindergarten yard and we have a schedule. So when you're in kindergarten, you play in the kindergarten yard. And then if you're a sibling, you always get to go to the kindergarten yard if you want to. If you're in grade 1, you always get to go to the kindergarten yard if you want to, because grade 1 is so close to kindergarten. But then the rest of the classes have a schedule of when they're allowed to go to the kindergarten yard, because really the older kids and the younger kids want to play together, and that's something that's very normal at our school. And because of that playful spirit, even at grade 5 and 6, the students play imaginary games. They don't lose that sense of fun and that sense of whimsy. Next slide, please. So we are Changemaker School, as I mentioned, and I just wanted to give an example of an inquiry. Sometimes our inquiries are just fun. Like a few years ago, the grade 4s were really interested in Norse mythology. And so they dug into Norse mythology, they wrote their own play, they made their own costumes, they composed their own music, they set up a stage outside, they brought all the parents in, and they presented what they had learned about Norse mythology in this very complicated, complex play. But many times what happens is when our students start to learn about something, they want to take action in some way. So this is one of our current grade 3s. And because we're off-site this year, we're spending a lot of time in local parks. We're right at Bedford and Bloor this year. And there are a number of people who we see every day who are either homeless or they may have some mental health issues. And the students noticed this and they had questions about some of the behaviors they were seeing. And so their teachers, instead of stopping that conversation, they welcomed that conversation, and they started to talk with their students about homelessness, food insecurity. They read a novel about that had a homeless character. They did some nutrition work, and then they had a budget of $40, and they tried to plan how they might feed a family for $40. They took $40, they went to the local grocery store, they spent the $40. And then they started to, and our local church is the Church of the Redeemer, which has a soup kitchen. So they invited the coordinator of the soup kitchen to come and do a session with them. And they learned a little bit more about food insecurity. And they learned that there were community fridges and community pantries. And so they decided to, first of all, they decided to do a food drive around the winter break. And one of the students offered to take the food to a community fridge. There are community fridges and community pantries, and they looked at the maps and they saw where they are. They found one. And then they decided, well, we're only at our site for a year. They wanted to create a community pantry or a community fridge, and they wanted it to be kind of a legacy when they leave. And so they started to talk. First of all, they wrote me a letter to ask me whether it would be possible to do this. And then we had a class meeting and we talked about this. And then one of them talked to the chair of our board to talk about whether that would be, that this could work. And we talked about sustainability. We talked about partnering with local businesses. So their next step is going to be to approach some local businesses to see if someone would partner with us so that when we leave the site, the community pantry or the community fridge could continue on. And we had some really interesting conversations about electricity and the cost of the electricity. And right now we're renting, we don't own our space. So would our landlord actually allow us to have a fridge? And we had all kinds of interesting conversations. So that's kind of a typical inquiry that our teachers didn't know at the beginning of the year that we would be talking about this, but they were open to the conversation. And then together with the students, they are creating a unit of study that will lead to some kind of action at the end. We're not exactly sure what it is yet. We can go to the next slide, please, Graham. Another thing that makes Mabin, the part of the Mabin magic, is there's a very small family feel. Now, we deliberately are shamelessly, unapologetically small. We don't allow more than 150 students in the building. In fact, there's a zoning bylaw that we cannot have more than 150 students in the building. So we are committed to that number. And 150 is kind of a magic number. There's lots of studies that talk about how when you have 150 people in a community, it's just the right number for everybody to know everybody, and all kinds of wonderful things happen. Synergetic things happen. And so you'll see that we're deliberately small, we're deliberately co-ed. What we're interested in is both the individual and making sure that each individual student can develop to their full potential to be the best human beings that they can be, and also community. so that we have one class per grade, and that class grows together, and sometimes there are conflicts and sometimes everybody gets along. And by the end of the 8-year journey of going from JK to 6, they're really kind of like siblings, and they know each other well, and they appreciate each other, and they understand that everybody has strengths and everybody has areas that they're working on. So that's the small family feel that we're talking about. And we are getting bigger. Our building is getting bigger, but not our population. We are building more space for our current students, and we're also building space that we can share with the community in different ways. But again, I'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide, please, Graham. And finally, we have, is it finally? I think this is finally. Yes, this is the final little bit of what is the Mabin magic. We partner closely with parents to make sure that we are doing the best job we can to promote the development of all of our children. We know that parents are their children's first teacher. They know their children better than we ever will. And then we know kids. So together we're a great team because we kind of have the big picture of about child development, and each parent has their own very intimate view of their child, and together we can do wonderful things in service of the children. This is an example. On the picture on the left is, we often have parents in the building when it's not COVID. We couldn't do that this year, but right now our temporary site is right beside the Duke of York. It's 2 doors down from the Duke of York, if anybody knows the Duke of York. And we've become very friendly with the Duke of York. We won't go into why, but anyways, we've become very friendly with the Duke of York. And we approached them and we said, can we use your patio when you're not there to have some parent gatherings? And they were happy to do that for us. So we started having coffees first thing in the morning with parents. And our parents are tough. I mean, they don't let rain keep them away. They don't let snow keep them away. We were probably the only school that was open on Tuesday because we're a tough crowd. We have resilience. We persist through struggle. And so we work with the parents, and we work towards the human development, both the academic and the personal development of the children. And I mentioned persisting through struggle. One of the frameworks we use is called habits of mind. And we start with 4 fundamental habits of mind, which are, hope I'm going to be able to remember these, Michelle: managing impulsivity, persisting through struggle, using empathy, and taking responsible risks. Those are our first 4. There are 16 habits of mind that were developed by Bina Kalik and Art Costa. And we have focused in on 10 or 11. Sometimes we add in thinking flexibly, which isn't officially one of ours, but we think it's a good one. And we're really excited because one of the things we're doing with our parents this February is we often do something called a parent-to-parent conference. We have so much talent in our parent community that we ask our parents to volunteer an hour of their time to help us learn together about usually children's mental health, something to do with children's mental health. And so in February, and you'll all be invited, we're having a parent-to-parent conference. We're having Bina Kalik, one of those original researchers about habits of mind. She's going to be our keynote speaker, and she's going to talk about parenting through challenging times using the habits of mind. And then we have 5 wonderful parents, including Jenna. Jenna's one of our speakers. We have 5 wonderful parents who are going to do workshops for other parents, and they're all tying it into habits of mind a little bit. So we have a pediatrician who's going to be talking about the impact of COVID on children and how we can mitigate against risks that have arisen because of COVID, how we can help kids persist through struggle. We're going to have an OT, one of our parents who's an occupational therapist, who's going to be talking about using movement to help children manage their impulsivity. We have another parent who's a clinical psychologist who's going to be talking about burnout, specifically parent burnout, and what we can do to support parents who are feeling burned out. Jenna's going to talk about co-parenting and listening with empathy, and how parents who are living apart can co-parent during this pandemic. And we have one other, again, I'm just not remembering everything. It's COVID brain. I'm not remembering everything tonight, but we have one other session that night too. So we will be advertising that really soon, and we hope all of you will join us for that. It's just an hour and a half, and it should be really, really fun and useful. Next slide, please, Graham. So I keep talking about the fact that we're actually at a different site this year. Our regular site is 50 Poplar Plains Road, and it is under construction right now. And here's some pictures of the construction. We're keeping our beautiful old building. Our building feels like a house, and we love that about it. It's the only school I know of where the kids play hide and seek through the house. When you're walking through the halls, students are sprawled out on the stairs or tucked into a nook reading or working together. And we love our old house, but we also think it's time to add on to, in fact, it's been a 20-year project. This is about the 20th year of this project. And over the last few years, we've had a capital campaign, and we've raised $4 million, and we finalized the plans, and we broke ground last summer. And we are on track to be back in our building for September 2022. And when we are back in our building, we'll have a brand new early years area for our kindergarten classes. And we also have Saturday morning drop-ins for parents and their children under the age of 5 and under. We're going to have a beautiful learning commons where classes can come together to collaborate, and a beautiful new art studio. Because art is really probably the jewel of our program. I mean, there's lots of great things about our program, but historically art is a huge support for all the learning that happens, and also a beautiful discipline in its own right. And we're calling this whole edition the Community Learning Lab because we will be hosting programs for the community, teacher institutes, parent conferences, the drop-in center Saturday mornings, intergenerational programming. Our hope is that with the additional space, it'll be a much better experience for our students who are in the building during the day, those 150 students, but that we'll be able to be in relationship with our community in a new way, and be able to have an impact as change makers in the world of education. So these are some pictures from our build, and I think we have world premiere. No one has seen this yet. Very quick, but extremely impressive time-lapse video. Next slide, Graham, of where we're at with the build. Here it goes. No one's seen this. I mean, I believe it's going to happen just because it's such a good video. So it's pretty exciting. I'm going to hand it back to Michelle, and she's going to introduce you to some of our families who can speak to this Mabin magic that we are talking about. And we will also take questions later on in the presentation. So if you have any questions about anything I talked about, please put them in the Q&A or the chat. And Michelle, back to you.
Thanks so much, Nancy. I love that video too. And the music and everything, the world premiere. It's very special that you were able to witness that with us this evening. You now want to meet some families, I'm sure. Normally, you would be in our building, you would be meeting students, you would be chatting with teachers. During COVID, this is the way we are doing things. So live from their own homes, we have 2 current Mabin families and even some students. So I'm going to prioritize an order of bedtime. So I think I will start with Alice. and James. Could you please introduce yourselves to our attendees and tell us what you love about the Mabin School?
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for having us here tonight. We are about a half a year into our Mabin journey. Our son James is in JK, and it just feels like we've been part of the school forever. It really is such a warm and welcoming community, and we really are just so thankful every day that he is at the Mabin School. Um, we adore his teachers, and we adore all the specialist teachers that we've gotten to meet. Everybody is just so passionate about their jobs and passionate about the students, and really just wanting them to learn and grow and succeed in their own ways. And that's really special to us. And I think, just hearing Nancy talk about the smallness of the school, that was one of the things that really drew us to Mabin, because we wanted our son to be in a classroom where he really was forming bonds with his teachers and with the other kids in the class. And when I ask him, what his favorite things about school are, he tells me it's being with his friends. We know how much he adores his teachers, and we also see, a lot of love coming back towards him from them. And that strong connection means everything to us. The other thing that we just love about it is the growth that we've seen in him in the few short months that he's been in the JK. And that's just everything from academic growth. We're seeing his love of numbers just explode. His reading is starting to come along, and the way that he's recognizing words and things around us in the world. So many random facts that, just like, didn't know my kid knew that. And it's really amazing to sort of just see his curiosity just expanding. And he gets to do things that he loves at school, but in this wonderfully cooperative environment. And there's also a lot of play. He often tells us about what he played at school today. And then when you listen to him talk, he's learned so much, but to him, it's not learning, it's playing. And that's just been incredible. We just love how supportive the school is, not just to students, but to us as a family. And also that there's so much, you can just tell that there's so much wonderful collegiality within the school. Like, you just get that vibe that every staff member, every teacher is there as part of a team, and everyone's just working together to make sure that your child is thriving and that the school is thriving. And it's a really special place. We feel lucky to be at Mabin.
Thank you so much. We feel lucky to have you and your family at our school. We're pretty lucky.
Thank you.
And we have Jenna and Dahlia here with Evan. You know Evan from our first slide, her joyful pose in the snow. Dahlia and Jenna, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about yourselves and what brought you to the Mabin School, and what you've loved about the experience so far.
Sure. And Evan can say something too, I'm sure. I think that we always knew we were going to be a private school since Evan was like in preschool, probably. I think we predicted we would be out of the TDSB at some point. We didn't know we'd be at Mabin, but we are certainly glad that we're at Mabin. So I think really early on in our time there, this is our first year at Mabin, and I asked Evan what her favorite thing was, and she said everything. Today's answer is pizza lunch. I just asked her a moment ago. So today's answer is pizza lunch, but it was everything at one point. What do we love about Mabin? It's actually hard for me to imagine when I was watching that video of the new build that next year is going to be even better. That's shocking to me because the Mabin that we know is already so amazing. So the thought of being in fancy new digs and this exciting new building, like it really is hard to imagine that it's going up a level. We don't know that Mabin yet, so we're super excited. Evan, do you have anything to add? What do you think of Mabin? She's gotten very quiet. The fact that, yay. Yay. Anything else you'd like to say? The fact that Evan is sitting here for this call shows some cutie pie, something about the development that we have also seen this just in the few short months that she's been at Mabin. She has gone from hating school, would you say, hating school and like really lacking confidence to loving school, and I would say increasing in confidence all the time. Like we see a lot of growth in her. So yeah,
I was actually just thinking as you were talking, Jenna, that I'm Dahlia, Evan's other mom, that when we first met Nancy and Michelle, they said, you know, if your daughter wants to join us, that'd be great. And we said, you likely won't see her. She doesn't interact in that way. And she's had an extremely difficult time at school. Evan's in grade 4 now, but school was not a great place for her. I can say quite confidently she's been transformed. Like, honestly, we've been there for 6 months. You pick her up from school, how was your day? Every time, no joke. Great.
Yeah.
Great. The best day.
Yeah. Yeah, she was skeptical, but it took about 3 days, I think, for her to. So for her to appreciate Mabin's qualities, and here she is in a Mabin shirt and a decorated hat just for the call. So she's pretty excited to sell Mabin to everybody. So yeah, it's been a wonderful experience so far. Dahlia,
I would also no. I was just going to agree with what Alice said. Actually, that it's the family feeling is instant. You know, from the drop off in the morning with Nancy outside, and sort of the announcement, Evan's here, and Michelle, like, it's going to make me cry, but you're very welcoming, and I feel like we've been there forever. And it's a school, and the experience of school has been challenging for our family, and it's just wonderful. Like, and the parents and people we've met, like events you go to, or like in the park, people are like just really friendly and helpful, and it's an amazing school. Like, it really is an amazing school.
And the support and the communication too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, our experience with that sort of thing, it's always been really lacking and difficult and challenging, and so the communication is fantastic, and communication with teachers is so fantastic, and it's so collaborative. So
yeah, Evan's teachers too, and the learning specialists, like, just the best, honestly. Yeah.
Do we miss anything, Nancy and Michelle?
Wow, I don't think you need Nancy and myself. I mean, we could just turn it over to you. That was beautiful. And what struck me, actually, when when everyone was speaking about their Mabin experience, was that it feels like to us also that you've always been part of our community in the best possible way. I don't think to myself, oh, this is Evan's first year at Mabin.
Right.
She's at Mabin, and we feel that too. So that's
Can I add to that, Michelle? I was just thinking, you know, with Alice's family, James has come in JK. Bianca's going to be coming next year. We're excited about that. And,
I think that.
you know, and ideally kids do come for the full 8 years, because it's kind of, we kind of talk about children being fully baked at the end. We want them to come in JK and leave at grade 6. And by the time they get to grade 6, they know who they are. They know who they are as learners. They're confident, they advocate for themselves, they still love to learn, and they do really well wherever they go next. And at the same time, we often get a few students in grade 4, grade 5, or grade 6, and it is transformative for them, and it can be almost instantaneous. And I think it's because we really just like kids the way they are. We value kids the way they are. We want them to be who they are. And we want to grow their strengths, and we want to help them identify areas of challenge and set goals and work towards those goals. And I think it's just the teachers have a deeply respectful approach to the children, and really believe in them and what they can accomplish. And while we preserve childhood in a sense, we also talk about some very challenging issues, and we try to make sure kids have a sense of what agency they have in the world and what they can control and how they can make a difference. And so it's kind of a beautiful, magical place. It's really all about the kids. I mean, one of the great things about a JK to 6 environment is there are no older children driving the agenda. We are, you know, our 5s and 6s are our leaders, and we are able to do what's right for the children all the time. And that's why on Monday we could call a snow day, because that was just what people needed. And on Tuesday, we could come to school, even though it was a hard day to get around the city. We could come to school because that's what we felt the children needed. And I think that's just a very immediate example of how their needs and their desires drive the decisions that we make.
And Nancy, I believe Jerry Mabin used to say, Mabin is a child's place that the adults are let in. First and foremost, it's a place for children, and we get to play there too, which is really a privilege. Graham, could you go to our next slide, please? So now is time for some frequently asked questions. And also, of course, we have our families here who are welcome to chime in at any time and add on. But I do have some questions that parents often ask me. So I thought, Nancy, are you ready? I'm going to ask you a few.
I'm ready. And also, if anybody has questions, they can please put them in the chat or the Q&A.
Please do. First question, Mabin's approach to special education is quite a unique model. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so I think we have the best special education model in the city, personally, but I'll tell you why. It's a fully integrated model. So the way it works is, in any given class, there's going to be a range of learners. There's going to be some children who might be identified as gifted, some children who might have a learning disability or might have ADHD or autism. And then there's a whole bunch of neurotypical kids. And then there's also kids who are very adept socially, and other students who struggle socially. And we love that diversity. The more diversity we have in our school, the richer the experience of the learning, because people are bringing different perspectives. And we love that. So the way we support that is the opposite of many schools. We have every classroom teacher partners with a learning strategies teacher, and all of the support is in the classroom. So all students get supported by that learning strategy teacher. A student might have a learning disability, and in that case, they're going to have some modifications made to their program or some accommodations made to their program. but the way we plan is kind of a universal design plan. So what we're thinking about is what's good for one is good for all. A student might need noise canceling headphones, but another student might find that useful, even though that it hasn't been identified as a need for them. And so if they find it useful to have noise canceling headphones, we'll have those for them too. Some students need a computer to work on. All students have a computer to work on. Some students need more different. So the way we design our activities, our learning activities, will be what we call low floor, high ceiling. So a student can go as far as they can go. And a student who is having difficulty with that activity can also enter where they're at. So there's a whole range of responses to many of the activities that we do. And, for instance, we have students in Evan's class they're all reading a really challenging, complex book. And some of them are reading it independently, and some of them are listening to an audio version, and some of them are, there's just a whole bunch of different ways to access the content. And so we love that. The other thing that we do is everybody gets the advantage of a big group socially. And then we do a lot of our work in half groups or small groups. So half the group might go off to art with our art specialist, while the other half stays with the classroom teacher and the learning strategies teacher. And the classroom teacher and the learning strategy teacher might have rotations, or one of them might take 1 or 2 or 3 students while the other takes the rest. And it's planned so that everybody's getting what they need. So it's a fully integrated model. It's deliberately diverse. We believe that everybody benefits from that. And there's everybody has needs and everybody has strengths, and we appreciate that, and we talk about that openly, and we celebrate it. Did that answer the question, Michelle?
Yes, and just a follow-up to that. What about specialists like occupational therapists, speech language pathologists?
Right. So we, like many schools, we have access to an occupational therapist and a speech language pathologist through our local health integrated network. And we give them space in our building to work with students. So if we see that there's a need, we'll do a referral. Also, once in a while, there'll be, the speech language that happens through the local health integrated network. I think that's what LIN stands for. Only does articulation, but once in a while we'll have a student who could really benefit from the communication part of speech language, and so we'll bring in a speech language pathologist for that too, a therapist for that too. So we have those kinds of supports, and we work with the family to figure out what supports are needed. And we kind of think of ourselves as, if the student is Michelle, it's Team Michelle. We're all working together with each other to make sure that Michelle is developing to her full potential. I don't know if any of the parents want to speak to that at all. No pressure, but if you'd like to, please chime in.
Sure. I can speak to some of this, that in a lot of ways, one of the things that I love that James is learning is actually how to be an advocate for his own learning, and also an advocate for his feelings and the way that he is feeling when he's in the classroom. So, it was about a month or 2 ago when we were driving somewhere, and he pipes up that he's going to tell his granny and grandpa all about self-regulation. And I think our jaws just kind of like hit the floor. And then he proceeds to tell us all about the zones of regulations. And this is coming out of the mouth of a 4-year-old. But it's also gotten to a point now where, like at home, if he's in a certain type of mood, he'll say to me, I feel a little bit yellow, which means that he's feeling a bit uncertain. And now that I know that, the language from school is coming home, and we're able to really work with him in a way that he feels confident and comfortable. And it's, I think, also helping us to, maintain the messages that are being taught at school. I'm even hearing myself use some of the habits of mind language, when I see him jumping, say, from couch to end table, and I say, is that a responsible risk that you're taking? And he'll come back at me with like, oh yeah, it's very responsible. It's not that much space, mom, and so I do think that it's really wonderful that the students are being taught from a very young age how to advocate for themselves and how to also think critically about their own learning, and be equipped with the language to be able to do it.
That's so wonderful to hear.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'd just like to say that this is sort of going back to the Evan, whatever you're doing. This is going back to the support in the classroom and the range of sort of where children are, with certain, we'll talk about the carrots in a minute. So we're getting amazing support. I mean, reading is a challenge in our home. And so, we've been working at this for quite a while. And I just want to sort of, acknowledge the support that we're getting at Mabin in this regard. And yeah, it's been really great to feel very much as though there is kind of a team working at this together to support Evan and us.
One of the things I would say, just to add to what Jenna said, is the initiative that comes from Mabin, and that feels really different for us. So we're so used to like showing up and begging almost and asking, and what can we do? And Jenna and I have like spent countless hours with principals and teachers, and there's like, you tell a story, they actually pay attention to your child. They know your child, and then they initiate the discussion and conversation with you. So it's real partnership. It's mind-blowing, and it's just really, really wonderful, actually.
Thank you for adding your experience to that as well. Really appreciate it. Next question, Nancy. Can you talk a little bit about the specialist teachers we have at the Mabin School?
Sure. So we have specialist teachers in, and again, if I forget anybody, Michelle, you're going to correct me. We have art teachers, and we have we will have a beautiful art studio, and there's a story about that too. But anyways, if we have time, I'll tell it. We have a wonderful music teacher who does mostly an ORF program, for those of you who know about that. And he actually teaches some ORF courses at the Royal Conservatory. So he's quite expert in that pedagogy. We have a science teacher who co-teaches with all of our teachers. So it's not that the kids go to science, it's that she takes what's happening in the classroom and then she creates a science curriculum with the teacher. And she mostly delivers it, but the teacher is there to support, and they plan in collaboration. We have a phys ed teacher, two phys ed teachers, but we have a specialist for phys ed. For the last 2 years, because of COVID, we haven't had a gym. So we've had to be very creative about where we do phys ed, how we do phys ed. But next year we will have our gym back, and we're very excited about that. And also a beautiful new playground, which includes a track that goes all the way around and a basketball court, and a climbing apparatus, all kinds of things. So we're excited about that. And we usually have a teacher librarian, but we haven't had a library for the last 2 years. So we'll have that again once we have our learning commons. And French, we have a beautiful French program. We have Claudine, who is Quebecois and teaches French from JK to 4. And then we have Lauren Saunders, who teaches French in grade 5 and 6. And she's also a working actor. So there's a lot of drama that happens through French, and also she pushes to have drama classes too. So we have a little bit of drama happening in grade 5 and 6. In fact, they are working on a musical as we speak. And sometimes they write their own musicals, and sometimes they write their own musicals in French. And sometimes they learn stage fighting just because they want to.
Thank you, Nancy. Something pretty special is happening in grade 5 and 6. Well, it's always been happening at grade 5 and 6 at the Mabin School, but it's kind of a new way of looking at those 2 years in terms of leadership. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so our grade 5s and 6s have always been the leaders of the school. But just this year, we decided we took some time with our grade 5-6 team, and we decided to I want to say repackage it, but that makes it sound superficial. But really, we wanted to go deeper with what we were doing. So we created a program called Mabin Leads, and the LEAD stands for Leadership, Entrepreneurship, and Adaptive Design. So we've always had leaders. We've always done entrepreneurial things. We've always taught about design thinking and done design tasks in grade 5 and 6. But we decided to call it Mabin Leads and really turn grade 5 and 6 into a kind of leadership academy. And it's been pretty exciting to see what they've been doing this year. What they do is it's almost like the grade 6s are the mentors and the grade 5s are the apprentices, and they pair up or get into small groups where there are 5s and 6s, and they take the lead on various big events that are happening in the school, like that winter solstice activity. They planned the whole thing with support from teachers, but they reached out to teachers. And in fact, we had a Remembrance Day assembly that the grade 5s and 6s organized. And one of our dads is in the military. He's which would be unusual for the Mabin School, but true. He's a sergeant in the military, and he's a lawyer, and he practices law in the context of the military. And the grade 5s and 6s emailed him and asked him if he would be part of the ceremony and if he would speak. And he didn't realize they were grade 5s and 6s. So he emailed them back, and he started talking about things that the kids at our school wouldn't know. And I had to email him and say, Gabriel, those are kids. So he stopped emailing, high level confidential information to them. And but it was just wonderful because they are learning to write professionally, and they are learning to budget for things, and they are learning to purchase. And I had an email today from a student who's organizing the Carnival event in February, and he had sourced out some Canadian made maple candies that are going to be part of the event, and he had found the link for the purchasing, and so he organized with me that we would purchase enough for everybody in the school. So just all kinds of really interesting things happening. Just a quick story about grade 5 and 6 leaders, though. The grade 6s often do a project with architects where they take a tract of land in Toronto, an actual tract of land, and then they use the principles of sustainable design to create a community space. And they each take a part of the community space, and they build a scale model of this community space. And they learn so much about sustainability, environmentalism, architecture, design, and then they present back to their parents. So there's that whole piece too. So about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, the grade 6s had just done this, and we were just at the point in our project where we were starting to think about the interior of the building after the build. And so I went to them and I said, I want to hire you as consultants. And I gave them each a section of the building. And I said, I want you to design what's going to happen inside the building and do a scale model for me and present it to me. So they did that. But in the process of doing that, the grade 6s realized that the new art studio was going to be smaller than the current art studio. And they were outraged because art is just a huge part of what we do at the Mabin School. And so they connected with the architect, and we actually changed the entire design so that the art room is now prime real estate in the community learning lab. It's bigger. It's got northern or northwestern light, which apparently is very important if you're an artist. And it's been designed to their specifications. So I think that's just an example of how we do play a lot, but we don't just play at making change. If there's a problem, the students become very adept at identifying it, creating a plan, advocating for that plan, and then making change happen. And they don't even realize how extraordinary that is. It's quite natural for them, but it is extraordinary, having worked at many, many schools. and been a student achievement officer and worked with many, many schools, the extent to which children really have an authentic voice in the working of the school is pretty extraordinary.
Thank you, Nancy. We've got a question in our Q&A. Can you please share more about the diversity of Mabin's staff and student population? How central is diversity, equity, and inclusion at the Mabin School?
This is such a great question, and it's one we're really grappling with. You know, when you talk about diversity, when you talk about, well, when you define diversity, there's so many different identities that intersect and that overlap. And, you know, so we're constantly thinking about how to become more diverse and to do it in a way that is meaningful and satisfying to everybody involved. And so we have struck a strategy and diversity committee on our board, and we are working with consultants right now. So right now we're working with Newman Ashraf from Rotman's. He's working with our board on this very question. And we are, part of our strategic plan is to come up with a system approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but one that isn't superficial, one that is deep and ongoing. And what we're looking for is a continuous process, so that as we learn, we can just get deeper and deeper into the work, because we know this is work that is not easy and doesn't happen quickly or ever end, really. In terms of inclusion, it's always been a principle, a foundational principle at the Mabin School. But I think what people thought inclusion was in 1980 is different from what people think inclusion is in 2022. And so I think that, you know, there's a spirit of inclusion, but we need to do the hard work of defining diversity, thinking hard about equity, especially in an environment that is inherently inequitable, because there is tuition and it's expensive. And so one of the things that we've been doing is looking at financial aid. For the last 5 years, we've had a financial aid program. This coming year, we'll have, we have a donor who's donated 4 years of tuition for a girls in STEM scholarship. And so we're going to unveil that tonight. Actually, we're going to talk to you a bit more about that tonight, but that's going live. And so we're looking, you know, there's so many different identities that come up in an ad hoc way through the curriculum, because the curriculum is driven by the children, and children are inherently interested in justice and fairness and equity. But where we're at as an organization now is looking at how we can be more intentional and think as a system how to build diversity, equity, and inclusion into the very fiber of our being. And so as as part of that, we have sought out a more diverse staff complement. So over the last few years, there's been definitely intentional hiring of more people of color, of people of varying ethnic and religious backgrounds, different genders, sexuality, other kinds of diversities. And then also in terms of our board, looking at our governance committee and our board, and asking them hard questions about how are we going to make sure that our board is representative of the community that we want to be. And then also recruiting heavily for diversity, both learning diversity and racial diversity. And we have a strong commitment to improving in this area and to be continuous learners. So that's my best answer right now. I'm hoping in 6 months I'm going to be able to answer that question even better, and in 6 months after that even better. It's it's a tough, important question. And as an organization, we're really grappling with it.
Thanks very much, Nancy. A question in our Q&A about technology, using phones or devices at school. How much exposure do students get to technology through the grades?
Right. So we use technology for the purpose of learning. We don't teach technology per se, although we do some coding, and we have at times taught robotics. And so technology in the sense that it's a vehicle for creative thinking and problem solving. But we don't kind of have a computer course or anything like that. Technology also is assistive. And so a lot of our students, it becomes very natural for them to use technology to support their learning. So we have one-to-one laptops for JK to 3. We tend not to use them at school in JK and SK. In JK and SK, we try to have very limited use of screens. But during COVID, it's been impossible not to use screens. So we have iPads for those remote learning times for our JKs and SKs. And then we have iPad use in grade 1 to 3, and it's 1-to-1. And then we use laptops in grade 4 to 6. And again, it's 1-to-1. We have a cart for each classroom.
Thank you, Nancy. And in terms of where, when Mabin students go on to grade 7, how well prepared are they? Where do they go? Can you speak a little bit about that transition piece?
Yes. So our students are very well prepared when they go on to grade 7. And I mean that in 2 different ways. And maybe Alice will speak to this later, because Alice Alice is a teacher at Bishop Strachan School. But anyways, first of all, we do one quick and dirty standardized test each year, just to keep us honest, to make sure that we're on track, because our teaching is very progressive, and we want to make sure that we are giving students the skills that they need. And generally speaking, our kids achieve on average well above grade level in reading and math. And we like to do that test just to make sure that's still true. And we have kids who go all over the place. And again, because we have a diversity of learners, different next schools are more appropriate for some than others. So we have kids who go to kind of the very elite private schools like Havergal and UCC and BSS and Branksome and York and Crescent and all those schools. We have UTS. We had a class a few years ago where 3 of the kids ended up at UTS the next year. We also have students who academically need more support. And so they go on to other schools like Greenwood or The Study or Toronto Prep. And not to say that those schools can't also support really high achieving students. They are able to do that, but they tend to be more flexible in terms of the students that they accept as part of their student body. And then our kids tend to go on to university afterwards, and they tend to rise to leadership positions at their next school because they're not afraid to take a responsible risk, and they love to learn. And our alumni, our oldest alumni are only in their mid-40s, but they tend to be kind of really interesting, creative, entrepreneurial people. And so we try to capture that in our alumni. It's not just our alumni magazine, but we have a magazine called The Changing Times. And The Changing Times captures stories about change makers in our community, including our alumni. And so if you're interested in finding out more about our alumni, you can take a look on our website and take a look at our publication, The Changing Times, or Changing Times. And what we do in grade 6, at the end of grade 5 and grade 6, is we work with each family to figure out what's the next best school for their child. And our kids tend to get into the schools that are of interest to them. And some go on to public school, and wherever they go, they tend to do really well because we plan that next move very carefully with the families. And I don't know, Alice, can you speak to how our kids do when they go on?
Yes, I can. So as Nancy, as Nancy mentioned, I am a teacher at BSS, Bishop Strong School, and I've been at BSS now for 19 years. And so I have definitely seen quite a few Mabin alumni come through the middle and senior school. And one thing that I will say is that when I think back to sort of the high-level leadership positions like head girl and prefect and those sorts of things, there are a lot of Mabin alumni who have indeed taken those positions as they've gotten older. Another thing that I can say is that the creativity shines through a lot, and the creativity in thinking shines through a lot. And, you know, BSS is very rigorous, and there's a big focus on critical thinking in a lot of the work that is done. And you can tell the students that do come through. And then I do know a couple of alumni who are now Mabin and BSS alumni. And there's one young woman who I think she graduated in 2013 or 2014. Has become a documentary filmmaker, and actually a couple of years ago won a young filmmaker's Oscar. I don't know if people know this, but the Academy Award gives out, the Academy for Film, I guess whoever does the Oscars, they have these awards for young up and coming filmmakers. And she was one of these award recipients. I know of another young lady who has done really, really well in advertising and marketing, and another who is now one of the coordinators of the Toronto Fringe Festival, all Mabin grads. And so, you know, also as someone who teaches in an independent school, we made the choice for Mabin, for our family, knowing that it would be a really great learning experience, educational experience, and foundational experience that our children would have the skills to carry through when hopefully they do go on to another independent school at middle or high school, or wherever, you know, as Nancy says, is right for them.
Thank you, Alice. It's great to have your perspective as an educator at another school who has seen and met those Mabin alum. Both Nancy and I have taught Mabin grads over the years in different schools as well, and it's sort of interesting to see that with the perspective of for us being at the Mabin school now. Nancy, there's one more question in the chat, and then I want to ask a final question. This is a really good one. How does Mabin balance telling the truth regarding difficult issues? So talking about things like COVID or climate change, gender identity, with managing the anxiety around that and letting a child be a child?
Such a good question. I'll give it my best shot, and then maybe the parents will want to chime in. I think the key with dealing with children in general is to let them lead the way. So what we do is we wait for them to ask, and then we make a judgment about how much they want to know. It's kind of like when your children start asking you those tricky questions about sex and sexuality, and you don't want to go too far because you'll scare them, but you want to be able to have an honest conversation with them to the point that they're ready to hear. So I think a great example is what happened with the grade 3s, and you know, there were some things happening in the neighborhood that were startling. You know, people yelling obscenities, people, there's a man near our playground who walks backwards all the time. And, you know, and the kids have questions about those kinds of things. So I think what the teachers do such a beautiful job of is they gather those questions, they answer the questions, but not in more detail than the children want or are ready for. And also, I think that they tend to frame the study in a way. I think the reason so many of the inquiries end up with some kind of an action piece is because they want the children to understand what they have agency over, what they have control over, how empowered they are to make a change, and or to help, and and so that we're developing hope and optimism in the face of real issues that the children are aware of anyway. So we take our cue from them about what they're picking up on, what they're interested in, and then we go with their questions and we try to answer in an age appropriate way, not giving more information they're ready for. So I hope that helps. And I don't know if Alice or Dahlia or Jenna want to add to that, or but that's my experience of how the teachers deal with it.
Actually, we on Orange Shirt Day, we reached out to James's JK teacher because we knew that there was going to be an assembly, and we didn't know how much was going to be shared with the students, the little ones, about the plight of the children who were in the residential schools. And actually our teaching team came back to us to say that at JK, they weren't going to talk about it, but what they were going to talk about was kindness and equality, and that they were going to they decided that the children were not ready for the orange shirt story yet, as they felt it might be upsetting to the very little ones. And so instead, they talked about kindness and the importance of heritage and individuality and showing respect to others for their individuality. And so that was actually really appreciated, and it was a really open conversation as well. And so there's a direct example of that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Alice. Graham, we could go to the next slide, please. And my question will tie in, and I just wanted Alice to see that picture because I chose it very specifically. We started with Evan in the first slide. It seemed only fair that your son would be on the final slide. Just a side note here, I was on that field trip. I am the photographer of this photo, and I needed to sleep for 2 days after the trip to Downey's farm with JK and SK. It was so joyful and fun to be on the first field trip, and who knows how long. That was back in the fall. And they kept me on my toes. I'm not going to lie. Just before I get to next steps in the admissions process, Nancy had spoken a little bit about the scholarship opportunity and financial aid.
Yeah,
Can you do the big reveal? Can you just...
Sure. So we're very excited. We got a donation from an anonymous donor, a parent at the school. And basically what the donor said to me was, the school does such a good job of inquiry, of teaching science, of creating excitement around science and technology and math. And I'm really interested in gender parity and making sure there's a nice balance of girls and boys. And I'm also interested in, this is what she said to me, I'm also interested in, best practices for girls in science, because, there's still a big imbalance in the world of work in terms of women being in STEM related fields. And that also has an impact on wage parity and all that kind of stuff. So she said, I'd like to donate a certain amount of money and could we use it to attract some girls who have an interest in STEM? And I said, that's a great idea, but we can't have a student just come for 1 year and then we don't have money to support them anymore. So would you think about donating, several years of tuition? So she said, okay. So
I just want to sidebar. There's a reason that we reached our goal of $4 million for the capital campaign. That's an example of that.
So this is brand new and it's our first time doing it, but we have up to 4 years of tuition for a girl in grade 3 to 6 who's interested in STEM, a new girl to our community. And, so depending on who it is, it could be a grade 5 student and it's 2 years of tuition, or it could be a grade 3 student and it's 4 years of tuition, or it could be 2 grade 5 students and it's 2. We don't know yet. We're kind of doing this for the first time, but we have 4 years of tuition to play with. And we are hoping that it will attract some dynamic young women in grade 3, 4, 5, and 6 to apply to our school. And we also do have some financial aid set aside. So we can also support in that way too. We're still a young school, so we don't have the resources to have as much financial aid as we would like, but that's certainly a direction that we're going in over time.
That's great. Thank you so much, Nancy. Next steps in the admissions process. We ask, when families are interested in applying to the school, we recommend that they submit an online application a year prior to entry. So at the moment, we are doing our virtual interviews for this coming September 2022. So there is an online application that is part of that process. And then we set up a time at this point. It is a virtual interview that gives Nancy and myself, and often one of our teachers, a chance to get to know you and your child. And one of our favorite parts of those calls is having 2 of our current grade 6 students join us and answer any questions that parents or students might have about the school. We also have upcoming events that we will invite families to. You have registered to attend this open house, so you are in our database. Nancy mentioned our upcoming Parent to Parent conference that's happening on February 16th from 7 to 8:30. You'll receive an invitation for that soon. If you don't already follow us on social media, we are on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and that's a great way to get a window into what's happening every day at our school and the Mabin magic, since it's not possible to visit in the same way as it has been in the past, but we'll get back there for sure. And if you have additional questions about the process, if I haven't been in touch with you yet, you can reach out to admissions@mabin.com. We can have a follow-up call. I can answer any questions that you might have. I want to say a big thank you to our guests tonight, to Graham behind the scenes, wizarding everything. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Graham. Thank you, Nancy, for sharing with us more about the Mabin magic. It is a pretty special place that we're a part of. And to Jenna and Dahlia and Alice and James and Evan, who are also here as a side bonus, thank you so much for being here and lending your voice to this evening. And to all of our families in attendance, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we hope to be in touch again soon. I will send out a follow-up email with the recording to tonight's session and a few of the other items Nancy mentioned. I will include links to that information as well for your reading pleasure. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great evening.